All right. So, my main concern at the moment politically is that Republicans don't believe America is a democracy. It's a very widespread thing. If you haven't run into it, just ask a conservative friend. If it just say how I ran into it, as I would say, hey, this is a democracy. We're supposed to work things out together. And as I said, this is a democracy. They go, America's not a democracy. It's a republic. Now, I think they've been playing so many word games that they got confused, and they just it's like they started calling the Democratic Party the Democrat Party. They were trying to play, they didn't like that, you know, America is all about democracy and you have this Democratic Party. They wanted to attack that. That's what I think. And so it's like it's not a democracy, it's a Republican. I think that's mostly it's mostly a semantic thing along those lines. However, they it's also anti-democratic, and you have the gerrymandering, which now the electoral college is not necessarily anti-democratic because you got to think about it this way. For example, some things in the United States, in order to change them, let me see if this is working. Yep. Um, you need a supermajority. To change the Constitution, you need a supermajority of a supermajority of states in order to pass a constitutional. I mean, you can check me. It's a supermajority at some level, a change to the Constitution. That's not anti-democratic. It's not democratic that 50% plus one person would decide everything. It's not democratic that there be like a pure democracy where we vote on everything. What are we going to vote on whether, some office of the government in Montana doing geological survey buys pens to replenish their pen supply? No, we have a representative. That's a nature of democracy. And as far as super majorities, it's like, yeah, the minority has some power because the people, when you have a democracy where the power is vested in the people are not of just one mind. So you can have something like the Electoral College or the Senate that that empowers uh, like a minority rural view, and that's fine because you want to get the rural view. You're not trying to erase minority opinions in the public. You're trying to get the whole public will of the people. You're trying to have a system now. There's an infinite number of types of systems to try to do that. But just because you have a supermajority or there's the rule of law, it's hard to change the Constitution. None of those are anti democratic or make this not a democracy. It's just a matter of we could argue about certain institutions and instruments in the democracy. We can argue about which are better, but it's not that it's not a democracy. And saying, hey, it's not a democracy. And then, when you call them on it, they'll point to founding fathers saying about how dangerous. Yeah, they said a democracy is dangerous. Yes, it is. So is a feudalistic system, right? There's dangers. A democracy does have dangers. They can be anticipated. You can put into the system some regulatory things, for example, requiring a supermajority to change the Constitution so that you have a more stable system. Things can't change too fast. A minority can veto on the principled idea that this is good. You shouldn't be able to steamroll a minority of the people. If it's a sizable minority, especially, it ought to be able to veto certain changes or abridgment of its own rights as a minority. So the dangers of a majority of a 50% plus one just steamrolling the rest, that's a part of a democracy. It doesn't make it not a democracy. And so while it might just be rhetorical because of the Democratic Party sounds like democracy and the Republican Party it sounds like a republic, it's still quite dangerous. And you do see abridgment of democracy and sort of a willful, I think, on the part of the Republicans because they fear that demographically they're falling behind. There's an inevitability to them falling behind on that. And so you have things like this extreme gerrymandering, which I agree, you know, the Democrats can be accused of having started that fight. Um, but whatever, right now we have this crazy gerrymandering where it gives this huge anti-democratic boost. It's a way of miscounting votes, of sweeping votes where you can ignore them and whatnot. And so that's different from something like the Electoral College, which some people believe is anti-democratic now, but you know has a justification that isn't just disenfranchisement. It magnifies the opinions of rural people, but if that's its purpose, that's not anti-democratic in itself. To actually take votes and shuffle them into places where they'll go to waste, or where you know all of the blue people in a in a state are get one elected thing that one elected person who wins by 90% of the vote, you know, as a way of getting them out of the other districts so that a different party can win. That's inherently anti-democratic, unlike the Electoral College. I think it's debatable whether the Electoral College is anti-democratic as well. I mean, we're arguing whether or not it subverts the will of the people or somehow enhances and stabilizes it. But you have this huge number of people that say, if America isn't democratic, what is it? Where does the power lie? And as usual, the Republicans want it both ways. They want to say, well, it isn't a democracy. And also, they're champions fighting for democracy. Why? Because spreading democracy is the American way. So they want it both ways. It's like, oh, that's semantics that you're calling me on this. And it's a dirty blow. Of course, I'm pro democratic while I'm saying that America isn't a democracy. America is a democracy. And frankly, if you say it isn't a democracy, then there's a serious problem. We have a serious problem. I have a problem with you being anti-democratic. Okay, so there's a lot of things. I mean, America was anti-torture. There's things you forced me to admit. America is no longer anti, but that America is anti-democratic, I'm not going to accept that. America is flawed. All democracies are flawed. Revolutions have failed. We're not at the end of politics. We need to fix our democracy. But that's because it is a democracy. It's a democracy that needs fixing. It's not a democracy. So I think that's a huge, huge, huge difference. All right, cheers.